New York, June 2025. It wasn't raining, but the air outside the Southern District Federal Courthouse in Manhattan felt thick like a storm had passed through and left its humidity hanging in every breath. By 7 a.m., reporters from CNN, Law and Crime, The New Yorker, and even hoodie-clad YouTubers with iPhones live streaming had packed the sidewalk along Worth Street. A long line of black SUVs stretched down the block. From a distance, it looked like a presidential motorcade. But there was no president here, only Sean P. Diddy Combs, once crowned the king of pop culture, now facing a federal criminal indictment that could put him behind bars for decades. The fourth SUV came to a halt. Its door opened slowly. No sunglasses, no performance smile like the ones he wore on red carpets. This time, Diddy looked more like a man being extradited than a celebrity heading to a party. Charcoal gray suit, loose tie, and eyes darting quickly toward the cameras, then down. Not a single word. Behind him walked two criminal defense attorneys, Mark Agnifilo, who once defended Ghislaine Maxwell in her human trafficking trial, and Brian Steele, the fearsome lawyer from the Young Thug case. They followed closely, heads slightly bowed, speaking to no one as if bound by some tactical silence. But if one looked closely, Steele's lips were pressed so tightly they'd gone pale, a sign even he wasn't certain what the day would bring. Courtroom 26B was steeped in tradition, wooden ceilings, velvet blue curtains, and cold oak benches. It had hosted trials that made history from mafia prosecutions to domestic terrorism. And now it was the music industry's turn to face the gavel. Presiding was Judge Harrison Trent, renowned for being patient but unrelenting. Every time he entered the courtroom, rose but few dared to meet his gaze. At the left table sat the federal government's legal team, led by Maureen Comey, a name that sent shockwaves through legal circles the moment it was announced. She was the daughter of former FBI Director James Comey, the man who once investigated Donald Trump's campaign. But this wasn't about legacy. Maureen was a seasoned federal prosecutor specializing in human trafficking, having led major federal operations against female abuse within extremist religious groups. Today, she led a six-person team all hand-picked for their expertise in RICO racketeer, influenced and corrupt organizations act prosecutions. The jury, 12 people, a plumber, a teacher, a communications student, a retired nurse, a car salesman, each a textbook representative of the American citizenry. They had been selected over 11 grueling days, with nearly 300 potential jurors dismissed due to connections to the entertainment industry or familiarity with Diddy's music. They were now entering the 8th week of trial, having heard 32 witnesses, watched 14 video clips, and examined over 220 pieces of physical and digital evidence. Yet none was more haunting than a short clip of a woman being dragged down a hallway at the Intercontinental Los Angeles Hotel. No screams, no intervention. Her face was blurred, but a name was whispered in the courtroom again and again: Gina. The official case name, United States versus Sean Combs. The indictment, 83 pages, charging 17 counts, including conspiracy to traffic persons for sexual purposes, forced labor, orchestrating prostitution schemes, laundering proceeds from unlawful activities, witness intimidation and evidence tampering, cross-state financial transactions to facilitate criminal conduct, concealing crimes using fame and entertainment industry connections. One striking detail: Diddy was the sole named defendant. Yet nearly 40 others were mentioned in witness testimonies ranging from personal assistants, bodyguards, record label executives, to artists who had once worked with him. 3 individuals were identified as primary victims: Cassie Ventura, Mia A., and Gina. Cassie, Diddy's longtime ex-girlfriend, had withdrawn her lawsuit after reaching a $30 million civil settlement at the end of 2023. Mia, a former assistant, was witness number 4. She testified in week 5. But the figure who most unsettled the entire system was Gina. Her real name was never disclosed in court. But over the 8 weeks from the testimonies of Cassie Mia Capricorn, Clark hotel staff, personal nurses, lighting technicians, and studio managers, her name came up at least 9 times. All described her as closer to Diddy than Cassie ever was, as the only one who made him lose control, and as the only one who refused to sign a non-disclosure agreement. In a court-played audio clip captured by a bodyguard's secret mic, Diddy is heard saying, "That girl, she thinks she's smarter than me. She's gonna regret it." Gina wasn't present. She had not signed any prosecutorial immunity. She hadn't responded to subpoenas, and prosecutors declared they were unable to establish contact. A media source whispered, "She disappeared in early 2024, just weeks after the hotel video leaked on CNN. Her absence, murky, mysterious, became the undeniable center of the trial. Like a ghost, hovering over every testimony, every juror's stare, every cross-examination." For 3 decades, Sean Diddy Combs embodied the American dream, from a paperboy in Harlem to a black billionaire, from an unknown producer to the mastermind behind Bad Boy Records, from scandals to the Met Gala red carpet. He once declared, "I'm not afraid of the law. I'm afraid of being forgotten." But today, he said nothing. He just sat there silent. And for the first time, the media didn't call him a hip-hop legend, but simply Defendant Combs. And what haunted people the most wasn't the list of charges. It was the overwhelming sense that they were witnessing the collapse of an entire power structure within the entertainment industry. Her name was Capricorn Clark, a strange, fateful name, seemingly destined for someone carrying the weight of saying what no one else dared. That day, she entered the courtroom with her hair pulled back, eyes bloodshot, and a folder tucked under her arm, not to prove she was a victim, but to testify as the first witness to something larger, a covert system of power within the entertainment world. We weren't called bodyguards. We were part of the internal handling team. My job was to know who was sleeping with whom, who was thinking of betraying him, and who needed to disappear before things got exposed. That was one of the first things Clark told the jury leaving the courtroom, breathless. Not from sensationalism, but from the cold precision with which she recounted everything, like someone who had walked through hell and returned clear-headed enough to describe each step down into the abyss. December 2011. A freezing New York winter. Clark had just returned from a business trip with Diddy in Atlanta and was crashing at the staff apartment near Madison Avenue. At 6 a.m., her phone rang urgently, not from the office or her manager, but from Diddy himself. "Get to the penthouse, now! Open the door. No one can know." She barely had time to wake up before Diddy stood at her door in a silk robe holding a Glock 19. He didn't say much, just looked at her like she was a traitor. "Cassie's sleeping with Kid Cudi," Diddy growled. "And you knew about it and didn't tell me." Clark tried to explain that she didn't know anything, but he wasn't listening. "Get dressed. Today we're going to kill that motherfucker." Clark testified that she was forced to accompany Diddy and his personal bodyguard, identified as Deshaun, a former Marine with a prior assault charge. They got into a black Cadillac Escalade, left Manhattan, and headed toward New Jersey, where Cudi lived at the time. On the ride, Clark said she secretly called Cassie not to warn her about the infidelity, but to save a life. "I told her, if you don't get Cudi out of that house now, someone's going to get killed." According to Clark, when they neared Cudi's residence, Diddy got out of the car with his gun and walked toward the house, but Cudi wasn't there. Instead, a sports car was parked in the driveway. Diddy smashed the side mirror, screamed, "He's hiding! Next time I won't let him get away!" They returned to New York, but the story didn't end there. A few days later, Clark was summoned to an old building near Chinatown, a former satellite office of Bad Boy Records, now stripped of signage. "I thought it was just a meeting," Clark said. "But when I walked in, the door locked behind me, and I was told I had to undergo a loyalty check." In a somber tone, she described being held for 4 days, no real sleep, only canned noodles for meals, and subjected to lie detector tests 3 times a day. The sessions were conducted by a man named Floyd, described as a private security expert with no official credentials, but deep ties to elite protection firms. He told me that if I failed, I'd be taken for a swim in the East River. But Clark didn't just recount personal trauma. She mapped out a structure. She described how Diddy organized special events internally dubbed freak-offs. They typically happened on weekends at the Viceroy Hotel penthouse or a mansion in Miami. Each time, about 6 to 10 girls were recruited through agencies or personal referrals. They had to sign NDAs, surrender their phones, and were served cocktails laced with stimulants. Clark emphasized not all were coerced. Some came out of curiosity. But many didn't know they were being filmed or what they'd have to do to get paid. Some victims, Clark said, weren't even conscious when they entered the room. But because of the money and Diddy's ties to powerful media companies, no one dared to speak out. By the 3rd week of the trial, the name Gina began surfacing more frequently like an invisible centerpiece. And Clark was the first to offer a detailed portrait of Gina. She was beautiful. Not striking like Cassie, more delicate, vulnerable. But that's exactly why he was obsessed with her. Clark said Gina was the reason Cassie had some of her most intense jealous fits during the early years with Diddy. But what haunted her most was Gina's eyes that one morning. I saw her walking out of Diddy's room around 6 a.m., eyes red, lips bloody. She could barely walk, her hands shaking, and the scent of drugs still clinging to her hair. Clark didn't know what had happened. But hours later, Gina returned smiling as if nothing had occurred. That's when I realized she had no choice. When Clark stepped down from the witness stand, the courtroom remained silent. Even the defense attorney Brian Steele made no immediate rebuttal. Perhaps the testimony was too detailed, or maybe he knew it wasn't time to strike yet. One juror, a middle-aged man in a blue button-down shirt, kept his head bowed for a long while when Gina's name was mentioned. A younger woman, possibly a teacher, sighed and scribbled notes furiously. That day there were no outbursts, no dramatic scenes, but it was the quietest the courtroom had been since the trial began. A reporter from Rolling Stone whispered to her colleague, "If what Clark says is true, this isn't just a criminal trial, it's an investigation into how power manipulates people through fear and silence. In federal criminal trials, nothing haunts more than absence. A witness might forget, a defendant might deny, a lawyer might deflect. But when someone mentioned by many, listed in the indictment, publicly known, vanishes without a trace, it leaves behind a void no truth or justice can reach." That woman had a name repeated again and again in witness testimonies: Gina. According to the federal indictment, Gina was listed as victim number 3 in the case against Sean P. Diddy Combs. But unlike Cassie Ventura, who sued civilly and withdrew her case after a $30 million settlement, and Mia A., the former assistant who testified in person, Gina never formally claimed victim status. She never appeared in court, never signed immunity agreements, and never featured in any trial footage. Yet her identity, according to 3 separate investigations by CNN, CBS, and the New York Times, was confirmed a model and artist who dated Diddy between 2014 and 2018. She had appeared in a few rap music videos, once had over 700,000 Instagram followers, and had attended the 2016 Met Gala as Diddy's rumored girlfriend. And then she vanished. In 2019, Gina made an unexpected appearance in a nearly hour-long YouTube interview on the talk show Unwind with Tasha K., a channel infamous for exposing the dark underbelly of American celebrity life. In the video, Gina said, "He once slapped me so hard I bled from the mouth just because I asked, 'Can I leave the party early, we?' Another time I said I didn't want another drink and he kicked me off the chair." Not metaphorically. Literally kicked me off the chair in front of everyone. Her voice held no tears, no sobs. Just a strange calm, the kind only found in people who've long given up hope of being believed. Gina continued saying she'd been forced to undergo 2 abortions, both arranged through a private doctor with no paperwork, no insurance records. I didn't have a choice. I wasn't even allowed to keep my own blood test results. But what drew even more attention was her final revelation. After I threatened to go public, I was handed a relocation contract under the name of a real estate company in Florida. They helped me move with $120,000. Gina didn't reveal who gave her the money, nor did she confirm signing an NDA non-disclosure agreement. But in the video's description, the host wrote, "We're not sure she'll be safe after leaving the studio. But she came anyway. She sat down. She spoke. That's more than many women ever dare." At the end of 2023, after Cassie Ventura filed her lawsuit and global media exploded with coverage, Gina reportedly reached out to a group of ACLU American Civil Liberties Union attorneys. One anonymous lawyer told Rolling Stone she wanted to testify. No pseudonym, no disguise. She said, "It's time." But just 6 weeks later, all contact with Gina was lost. Phones disconnected, emails bounced. Her listed address in Los Angeles responded with, "Tenant moved. No forwarding info." Federal prosecutors confirmed they were unable to locate witness number 3, stating they had issued subpoenas across California, Nevada, and Florida with no response. In the absence of a witness, speculation spread rapidly. On Reddit forums, Twitter fan pages, and legal podcasts, many believed Gina had either been threatened or bought into silence. There was no direct evidence. But in Section 38B of the federal indictment, a strange detail surfaced. An unidentified witness received $100, $1,000 in cash at the Peninsula Hotel in exchange for security footage related to a violent incident in 2016. Coincidentally, CNN aired a short video clip of a woman being dragged through a hallway at the Intercontinental Los Angeles Hotel. Her face was blurred, but those who had known Gina recognized her body, her hair, even a necklace, a birthday gift once given by Diddy. In the 7th week of trial, Eddie Garcia, a former security guard at the Intercontinental, was called to testify. Only 33 years old now, he had been 24 at the time of the 2016 dragging incident. His voice trembled. "I didn't know her name. But I remember. Small build, black hair, leather jacket. I was told to delete the footage, but I saved a copy just in case." Garcia said that days later, he got a call from Christina Korm, then Diddy's senior assistant. She offered $50,000 to buy the tape. He refused. A week later, the offer doubled. "I gave them the original and signed an NDA, but I haven't slept well since." Garcia confirmed that the woman in the video was Gina, and that was the last time he ever saw her. Lead defense attorney Mark Agnafilo didn't waste time. If someone isn't willing to testify, has no medical records, no civil filings, and no public statements, then it's all hearsay. And hearsay doesn't convict American citizens. He argued that all allegations surrounding Gina were recycled narratives with no substantiation, and that everyone who spoke of her had motives, money, fame, or avoiding prosecution. But prosecutor Maureen Comey shot back fiercely. "Gina not being here doesn't mean the truth isn't. She's not absent because she doesn't want to be. She's absent because someone doesn't want her here." Comey pointed out that Gina was referenced in 14 independent testimonies from witnesses across 3 states, with no relation to one another, all describing the same patterns: fear, control, and disappearance. Gina's case wasn't just a missing witness. It became a symbol of what activists call a hollow wound in the justice system. When someone can't or dares not show up, their absence becomes the strongest proof of how power works. A journalist from The Atlantic wrote Gina represents every woman ever touched by the powerful and then erased from reality as if she never existed. In court, prosecutors frequently pointed to the empty witness chair when referencing Gina as if to emphasize the unspeakable. Gina may never have taken the stand, but her voice online, in memories and grainy footage, kept echoing. Where is Gina, who silenced her? And if she's dead, who is accountable? Those were the questions no one could answer immediately, But for those following the trial, and for the women who've lived in the shadows like Gina, the truth, however delayed, always finds a way to rise. In cases where testimony hinges on personal memory, even a few seconds of footage can become a double-edged sword. To prosecutors, it's proof of domination and psychological manipulation. To defense attorneys, it's a sign of consent or even affection. No video caused more controversy than the one shown on day 28 of the trial, Diddy's 44th birthday party. The frame opened on a penthouse lit by candles and red roses. The soundtrack, a Dirty Money remix of Coming Home. Steele wasn't about to let the emotional momentum carry the prosecution too far. He unveiled a cryptic text Mia had sent in 2022, composed entirely of emojis. He raised his eyebrows toward the jury and said, "Snake. Love. Fire. Camera. Stop. Is that affection or a coded threat?" Mia didn't answer. Prosecutor Comey objected immediately. "Your Honor, emojis are not admissible as evidence without proper context." Judge Trent nodded firmly. Sustained. Counsel refrained from subjective decoding. Still, the message hung in the air like smoke from an unexplained fire. Legal analysts in the room noted a distinct tension among jurors. A subtle split was forming. Some leaned toward empathy. Others now squinted, doubtful. One media correspondent from Vanity Fair observed a middle-aged woman on the jury wiped away tears as Mia described her nightmare. But another juror, a man in his 40s, kept shaking his head and jotting notes when the birthday video played again. And as Mia stepped off the stand, a reporter whispered from the press gallery, "How do we tell what's real?" When the victim herself doesn't know whether it was love or fear. No one answered. Because in a courtroom, truth isn't a feeling, it's what can be proven under oath. At the epicenter of a trial that had shaken America's entertainment industry, where witness after witness testified to drugs, violence, and sexual coercion, an unexpected name emerged quietly, almost accidentally: Aubrey O'Day. Former member of the girl group Danity Kane, O'Day had been managed by Diddy during the Making the Band reality series. Few anticipated her appearance. Fewer still were ready for what she would say. Taking the stand in a navy suit and clear voice, she stated, "Mia didn't love him. She feared him. But when you're afraid of someone, you'll sometimes do everything you can to make them believe you haven't betrayed them." O'Day testified to having seen Mia apologize for being 15 minutes late and recalled overhearing Diddy say, "You think you matter without me." She paused, then turned slightly toward the jury. "I watched her break, not from what was done to her, but from trying to survive it without being erased." To reconcile the apparent contradiction between Mia's affectionate messages and her rape allegations, the prosecution brought in Dr. Lenora Banks, a forensic psychologist who had previously consulted for the FBI on human trafficking cases. Her analysis was clinical but profoundly unsettling. Stockholm Syndrome doesn't only affect hostages. It happens to victims who are financially controlled, emotionally isolated, and socially manipulated. They may write loving words because that's the only way they know to stay safe or to maintain hope that they'll be released. Dr. Banks then broke down several of Mia's messages line by line, highlighting what she called emotional scripting, a phenomenon where victims craft emotionally pleasing language to appease their abuser and avoid punishment. This is not evidence of love. It's evidence of fear being performed as loyalty. In the dim light, a woman in a red dress stood before the camera. She held a lipstick, applied it lightly, and smiled. "Happy birthday, Puff Daddy, the biggest inspiration in my life." That woman was Mia Ayyy, then a second-tier personal assistant to Diddy. The clip was only 12 seconds long, but in the courtroom it felt like a blade slashing through weeks of painstaking prosecution narrative. But Steele wasn't done. He returned to the stand with one final question. Calm, quiet, precise Dr. Banks, if a person says, "I love you," to the man she accuses of rape, buys him gifts, sends him texts with hearts. How can that be considered abuse and not a relationship? Dr. Banks didn't flinch. Because survival doesn't look like resistance. Sometimes it looks like compliance. Victims often perform affection to stay alive. The courtroom held its breath. But just as the focus seemed to return to Mia, a new name entered the frame, one no one had expected: Ellen DeGeneres. For years, Ellen had been the embodiment of joy, safety, and LGBTQ+ freedom on American television. Her presence in a federal criminal trial involving trafficking, coercion, and silencing was unthinkable. And yet sometimes absence speaks louder than presence. In a supplementary document submitted by the federal prosecution, not part of the main indictment but introduced as contextual material, there was a recorded audio clip. The voice belonged to Stephen "Twitch" Boss, the former lead DJ on the Ellen DeGeneres show. The clip was recorded in 2022, just months before his suicide. In the audio, Twitch recounted a memory from 2016. Ellen invited me to meet someone important in the industry. It was at a private party at the Highland Viceroy in Los Angeles. That someone was Sean Combs. His voice hesitated before continuing. I didn't even know who I was being introduced to. I was just asked to take off my shirt, do a few dance moves, and then the lights went off. The audio ends in silence. No one knows what happened next, but it was enough for prosecutors to request an evidentiary review of so-called party structures connecting influential figures in entertainment. The next day, a new witness was called: Jasmine L., a former bartender at the Viceroy Hotel. She testified that between 2015 and 2017, she saw Ellen DeGeneres escort groups of young black male dancers to private parties involving Diddy on at least 3 occasions. She'd always leave around 1 a.m. After that, the doors to the upper floor would be locked. When asked if she ever inquired why, Jasmine said, "A manager once told me, adult business. Don't ask." Diddy's legal team flatly denied any such interactions. Mr. Combs has never hosted a party attended by Ellen DeGeneres at that location. But the prosecutors weren't focused on physical presence. They were interested in the mechanism, how people were funneled in, who facilitated the gatherings, and how reputations shielded actions from scrutiny. It didn't matter if Ellen knew what happened after she left. What mattered was that she opened the door. The public was stunned. Why wasn't Ellen subpoenaed? Why wasn't she called to testify? She wasn't listed among the primary witnesses. She wasn't directly accused. No footage. No emails, nothing explicit, and yet her indirect presence through testimonies, memory, and behavioral patterns sparked discomfort across the country. A journalist from The Guardian wrote, "Ellen represents how the Hollywood machine allows someone to become an unwitting courier." She may never have seen what happened after she left the room, but she was still the one who held the door open. Stephen "Twitch" Boss's death in 2022 was ruled a suicide attributed to unexplained depression. But when the recording was retrieved from his personal phone, unlocked with Apple's assistance, many began to suspect something more. His family declined comment. Ellen issued no statement. But at trial, one detail sent chills through the room. The very day Twitch recorded the audio was the same day Mia Diddy's former assistant sent him a final text. "Thank you for not leaving the room when I started crying." Just the day before, Mia voice cracking had testified that on that very night, she was forced into a group sex act with 2 other men in a room next door, while Diddy sat watching from a sofa sipping cognac in silence. As the video ended, Brian Steele stood up. He didn't need to yell. Just one question. If he raped you, why did you wish him happy birthday 3 times on video, in texts, and in a handwritten card? The courtroom froze. Mia's eyes dropped to the table. Her voice trembled but stayed steady. When you live in a world where he controls everything, where you live your job, your passport saying happy birthday is the only way to not be erased. The jury gave no visible reaction. But legal analysts in the room grew concerned. Emotional testimony can crumble under the weight of footage that appears voluntary. Texts, the fragments of dependence, prosecutor Maureen Comey swiftly countered. She presented 11 messages spanning from 2019 to 2022, 3 years after Mia left Bad Boy Records, in which she continued to send greetings, expressed affection, even calling Diddy her guiding light. Brian Steele emphasized, "People don't talk like that about their rapist," but Mia replied, "He wasn't just my rapist. He was the first person who got me out of a hostel in Queens, gave me my first job, took me to Paris, to Bali, to places I never dreamed of." That's what confused me, and that confusion was the biggest trap of all. In the following weeks of testimony, Ellen's name never formally reappeared in any filed document, and yet her shadow lingered. Journalists, activists, and even members of the jury, according to one courthouse staffer, were all whispering about her. Not because they believed she was guilty, but because her indirect involvement made everything less black and white. When the powerful aren't just individuals, but a system of artists, managers, sponsors, bodyguards, and even safe talk show hosts, the story ceases to be about one bad actor. It becomes about the ecology that protects them. A legal analyst on CNN's Legal Brief summarized the sentiment in her weekly review. If this trial ends with only Diddy receiving a sentence, justice will not have been fully served. Because the people who recruited the victims, filmed the acts, enforced the silence, or even just made the introductions, they too must be held to account. Ellen may never stand trial, but her absence had already raised a larger question in the American public. How many good people, genuinely good people, have unknowingly become conduits for terrible things? When the federal courtroom turned off its projectors, when the final witness stepped off the stand, when the heavy doors of courtroom 26B shut for deliberation, what remained wasn't a complete truth. It was a haunting silence, not because no one spoke, but because too much had been left unsaid. The case of Sean P. Diddy Combs had become an earthquake, its epicenter buried beneath the foundations of American pop culture. A stage once lit by stardom now flickered with the unspoken, and the most shocking element wasn't the videos, the texts, or the NDAs. It was the people who never appeared, the evidence never found, and the questions that would never have answers. From start to finish, the name, Gina, remained like a ghost, mentioned at least 14 times by various witnesses, all describing the same appearance, the same behavior, and the same disappearance. Federal prosecutor Maureen Comey tried her best to reconstruct the truth: audio recordings, medical inferences, second-hand testimonies, but the puzzle was missing its core. Gina, believed to be the woman in the Intercontinental Hallway video, never testified, never spoke publicly after 2019, and by the trial's final week, her fate remained unknown. An ACLU-filed missing persons request had been quietly withdrawn with no signature of receipt. Rumors persisted. Some said Gina had been relocated overseas for her safety. Others believed she'd been paid off again, this time, not $120,000, but $3 million. All of it remained whispers. Cassie Ventura, the woman who had sparked the chain reaction of legal action against Diddy in late 2023, was also absent. She had withdrawn her civil suit after reaching an estimated $30 million settlement, a sum prosecutors could not touch because it did not constitute a criminal violation. In closing arguments, the defense weaponized that fact. If Cassie truly wanted justice, Agnifilo asked the jury why did she choose money. It was an easy question, but anyone who had read the indictment knew Cassie wasn't just another witness. She was the beating heart that had been choked inside a system she once trusted. But the law has no room for sentiment. It only deals in sworn testimony. And Cassie had gone quiet. Other celebrities, those who knew but said nothing outside of Ellen DeGeneres, at least 6 other famous names surfaced in the sealed addenda to the federal case files. Among them, 2 female singers who had collaborated with Diddy, a Hollywood actor, a basketball player, and 2 record label executives. None of them were charged. None were officially named in open court. But all were connected in one way or another to late-night parties, undocumented payments, and young women who never returned. Why weren't they subpoenaed? A source from within the court told a reporter off the record, "You can't summon 20 powerful people to fight one powerful man. The whole system would collapse." One of the pivotal pieces of evidence remained the hotel hallway video, the one where a woman was dragged across the floor without resistance, without a scream. But the original video, once safeguarded by security guard Eddie Garcia, had vanished after being handed over to Diddy's team for $100,000. Only a compressed copy, blurry and damaged, was found on a backup hard drive at a friend's home. The FBI forensics unit could not verify its original timestamp. The defense seized the opportunity. This could be a reenactment. How do we know this isn't a staged video? If there's no original, then there's nothing at all. Prosecutors pushed back hard. The void inside that video is the evidence of deceit. But courts don't judge based on morality. They judge based on admissible proof. The silence of the other women. In sealed documents later leaked online, at least 27 women were listed as former employees of Diddy in roles such as image assistants, temporary creative directors, and personal wellness consultants. Many had received severance packages ranging from $50,000 to $250,000 each, tied to airtight NDAs. Some were threatened with lawsuits if they disclosed anything that could damage the Sean Combs brand. None of them appeared in court. None came forward. But each name on that list stood as a quiet answer to a louder question. Why did only 3 speak out if only 3 were victims? Judge Trent. This was never going to be a perfect trial. In a rare off-the-record comment to a court reporter, Judge Harrison Trent said, "I've presided over drug cases, terrorism trials, even organized murders, but I've never seen a case where the most dangerous part is what was never said." He acknowledged that multiple elements were beyond the court's jurisdiction: cash payments over $5 million within Bad Boy Records Books' intermediary bank accounts in the Cayman Islands and offshore financial conduits likely designed to avoid scrutiny. As the trial drew to a close and jury deliberations began quietly, lawyers packed up their binders, reporters prepared their final drafts. But for those who had followed all 8 weeks and for millions of Americans, a singular emotion lingered. We saw a lot. But even more was kept from us. With every blank space, every missing witness, every unsaid sentence, the truth became a painting left unfinished, but powerful enough to haunt. Sean Combs was never just a celebrity who could quietly disappear after a verdict, guilty or not. He was a living symbol of a generation, the first black man to turn hip-hop into global capital. The architect of Ciroc Vodka's rise from obscurity to billion-dollar status. The man who stood beside Barack Obama, Jay-Z, and Ellen DeGeneres in a single photo. But when Diddy walked out of court that final day, no media frenzy. No fans asking for autographs. Only a man alone. Not because he was afraid, but because he finally understood what was coming. In more than 30 years of empire-building, Combs had created a multimedia kingdom: music, fashion, liquor, television, real estate. But at its core, his power didn't come from money alone. It came from controlling people. And when that control is stripped away, what remains is just a string of wounded lives. Legal experts describe the Diddy trial not just as a criminal proceeding, but as a sociological autopsy, a dissection of how fame, image, and wealth can build a power ecosystem few dared challenge. From assistants bound by NDAs, to music executives who looked the other way, to security guards who carried out off-contract commands, to megastars who chose silence, they all helped protect one man. And when that system finally cracked, it didn't just shatter one individual, it forced an entire industry to look in the mirror. Victims like Cassie, Mia, and Gina, different in age, background, and exposure, shared one brutal commonality. They weren't believed at first. People asked, why didn't they speak sooner? Why send affectionate texts? Why stay, go back, even say, happy birthday? The answer lies not in legal logic, but in the psychology of dependence. When you live in a world where your abuser also pays your rent processes, your visa holds your passport and controls your career, resistance is not an action. It's a slow, exhausting awakening. This trial showed the public something few wanted to confront. Power blurs the lines between love and fear, between gratitude and exploitation. We didn't hear Cassie recount her trauma in her own voice. We didn't see Ellen or other famous figures questioned. We didn't see the original versions of key videos. We didn't hear a public apology from Diddy, neither as a man nor a public icon. And perhaps that's the most chilling truth of all. In modern society, some truths will never stand trial. They live in silence, in payoffs, in vanished tapes, and in the eyes of people who no longer believe in justice. No one knows what Diddy's future holds. He may be sentenced. He may appeal. He may retreat from the spotlight only to re-emerge rebranded as a misunderstood man. But one thing is certain. The door this trial opened will never fully close. It leads to other investigations, other victims, and likely other trials where Diddy may no longer be the central figure, but the system he represented continues to echo. As one writer put it, "When you touch darkness, it doesn't disappear. It clings to your skin, and then it starts to spread." When the jury retires for deliberation, justice doesn't arrive. When they return with a verdict, justice still isn't complete. Because justice is not black or white, not guilty or not guilty. Justice is when a society begins to ask itself, why do we trust images more than behavior? Why must victims prove their pain through video? Why is power allowed to accumulate unchallenged? The Diddy trial didn't answer all those questions, but it forced America to confront one devastating truth. No one, not even the most powerful, can live outside the consequences of their actions. And that perhaps is where justice finally begins.